premise that I would like people to think about is the Fed would rather have a villain and a scapegoat to do its dirty work for. And I would like people to think in the back of their minds when Klaus Schwab said there'll be a great reset, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. When he first said that, I thought, what's this guy talking about? There's no way that this could ever happen. Well, let me show you a linear progression of events, and you decide for yourself if it's possible or not. And I think it is, unfortunately. All right, we'll start in 2017. That's our starting point. And in 2017, we were, gold had moved up from 2000 to 2011, 11 years in a row of increases. It was in a bull market. It was up 10, 15% per year. But from 2011 to 2017, it was in the midst of a pretty retrenched bear market. And by 2017, you had Bitcoin taking off. You had gold languishing. You had the stock market doing very well. You had people selling gold for the first time in my career, where 50, 60% of every sale we did was people selling instead of buying. And most of my career, they represent one out of every couple hundred sales was someone selling back. It's an industry where most of the time people don't sell back. Of course, we provide that, but that's not something we were used to. There were a lot of people capitulating in 2017, along with the central banks. That whole period of time, I was seeing central banks relinquish their gold, and it just made no sense to me. Like Gordon Brown, the head of the Bank of England, sold all of their gold in '02, most of it at $250 an ounce, the worst possible time to dump their gold, and certainly it smashed down the price. But anyways, suffice it to say, we saw even this Washington Accord, where the banks agreed to only sell a certain amount of gold each year to not destabilize the price. It was an issue of them selling their gold. And it made sense to me subsequently why they were doing it. At the time, it never did make sense to me, and I'll get into that in a moment. So anyways, in 2017, in the midst of all of this selling and 6-year bear market and stock market going up and crypto market going up, out of nowhere, we hear the German Bundesbank say, listen, we've been asking for our gold back for some time now from the New York Federal Reserve. We're going to start making a stink about it. We want all of our gold back that you've been holding for all of these years. We want it back no later than 2020. Well, it should have been able to be packed on a ship and off it went, but that's another story. The bottom line is they made a big deal about it. You go back and look at the stories in 2017, and you'll see German Bundesbank requests their gold to be sent back. It actually made it to mainstream publications. So within a few months of that happening, we saw other banks follow suit. Austria, Hungary, Turkey, the Czech Republic, Poland. All of these banks said the same thing, not only to the New York Fed, but to the Bank of England: give us back our gold. And this was unusual to see these banks repatriating their gold at a period of time when central banks had largely been selling. In 2018, the following year, those same groups bought more gold as a group than they did in the previous 60 years combined.
Whoa.
And it's interesting to note right now that a lot of these European countries that are part of the euro but have their own currency, like Hungary and Turkey and Poland and the Czech Republic, just in the last year, these countries have increased their gold holdings, most of them 10x or more. So you have these same European countries who have been repatriating their gold, or did repatriate their gold from the Bank of England and the New York Fed.
Wait, so can we assume from that they are now coming to the understanding that there's counterparty risk, or that perhaps the gold doesn't even exist in these vaults in the UK?
I think that's certainly part of it. There's no question that's part of it, but I think you'll see where I'm going here in a minute. There's more to it than that. So in 2019, the following year, those numbers were up 90% from the previous year. And that previous year, they bought more gold as a group than they did in the 60 years combined. So 2019, they almost double what they buy in 2018. And then we get the first of the 3 biggest events of my career happen. And that is that gold is reclassified as the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset. Now, let me say that one more time. Gold has been levied from a tier 3 asset to a tier 1 asset, the only other tier 1 reserve asset in the world next to US dollars and treasuries.
Nope.
At the end of World War II, gold was a tier 3 asset, and the only tier 1 asset in the world were dollars and US treasuries.
No, wait, is it the BIS with that designation, or who's making that designation?
National Settlements in Basel, Switzerland was that reclassified gold as a tier 1 asset. This is the central bank or central bank. Bank of International Settlements. So it's as if they told their cohorts, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Turkey, Czech Republic, Poland, all these countries, hey, we're going to be reclassifying gold tier 1. You ought to probably get it home, and it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to start accumulating it. They front ran this decision, and the media does such a poor job of telling us about this. How many people know that gold is a tier 1 asset? And the first question I would ask is, why the hell would they have done it with gold? Most people thought if they ever did something this way, then it would be special drawing rights from the International Monetary Fund. Why not use euro? Why not use yen? Why not use anything other but why gold? The reason the banks were selling gold prior to that was a tier 3 asset, which meant that only half of the value was calculated on the balance sheet. And so, the countries didn't have any incentive to own something that paid no interest, which denigrated the balance sheet and was volatile to a degree. So they'd rather buy U.S. treasuries. And this is kind of probably why the whole banking system was set up with the tier 3 asset behind gold, because it would incentivize them to buy paper assets, to buy treasuries that paid a return that they didn't have to store, that were a little bit more predictable. So anyways, now you see this drive to accumulate gold. And so in 2019, they reclassified tier 1. And then at the end of 2019 comes the second biggest event of my career that is really growing right now. And that is the announcement of the Chinese Belt Road and Rail Initiative. And for people out there who don't know what that means, because our media is so lame, that is the largest infrastructure project in human history ever attempted. And it is connecting Asia and Africa. It is connecting 75% of global population. It is connecting 45% of global GDP before industrialization. It is not just maritime channels, bridges, railways, and roads that are being connected. It's also digitally connecting 75% of human population. Think about the uses for silver in this infrastructure, in its digital applications, and connecting 7 out of 10 people, or almost 8 out of 10 people, but also all of the channels that will be used in the industry where silver will be needed. These roads, these bridges, these maritime channels, these flight routes will only be controlled by military and traveled by commerce. The United States is very conspicuously not part of the Belt Road Initiative, the largest, most robust infrastructure project in human history. And guess what? It is settling on the new Chinese digital yuan. The digital yuan has already done close to 10 billion in transactions since 2021.
Can we?
Pardon me?
Well, I want to interject. Can we also say that the economic sanctions against Russia in March of this year have only accelerated Russia's embracing of trade with China and this entire initiative?
Okay, well, that's part of where I'm going with all this, believe me. But at this point, we're still in the very early stages of the development of the Belt Road Initiative. So 2020 rolls around, and we see some interesting things. We see the International Monetary Fund, which is a group that was formed at Bretton Woods at the end of World War II. It's about 190 plus countries around the world. They come out publicly on their website and they say, we want a new Bretton Woods. Well, Bretton Woods was the event that anointed the dollar its world reserve status, taking over from the pound sterling at the end of World War II. So you got 190 countries saying we want a new dollar stamp, a new system, whatever that may be. We see a group of traders on the commodity exchange called the Others arise. Without getting too deep into the COMEX market, which is where the commodities are traded, typically each week the commodity exchange publishes a report called the Commitment of Traders Report. And that report shows the positioning of the largest traders on the COMEX. And normally it was always the commercial banks on one side and the speculators on the other. No one ever took delivery off the COMEX. Maybe one out of every, 1 or 2% of the contracts stood for delivery. Most were just used as financial instruments. And out of nowhere, we see this third group of reportables come on the Commitment of Traders report called the Others. And these others are believed to be sovereign wealth funds and family offices. In 2020, they started systematically draining the COMEX of its gold and silver. In 1 year in silver deliveries, they took as much off the exchange as we would see in a decade. In 1 year in 2020, they took as much gold off the exchange as the Bank of Japan has in its official holdings. Wow. Now, they've gotten a little bit more clandestine in the way that they're doing it now through something called exchange for physical, which is where they take a COMEX contract and send it to the London Metals Exchange, and it's delivered to them there in a little bit more anonymity. And they can take it, offload it that way without creating as much attention. But the theme that we saw in 2020 for the first time ever, that is parallel with the commercial banks taking possession and the central banks taking possession, was the most sophisticated private traders in the world, the hedge or the family offices and the sovereign wealth funds. We see the central banks continuing to buy gold in 2020, no question about it. We also see a proliferation of the Belt Road Initiative where it's growing and it's getting more robust, and you start to see transactions being done on the new digital yuan.
Now, a quick question on this Belt and Road Initiative, and I'm going to ask our editor to show a map because it's quite extensive, pretty amazing. All the way from Beijing westward through central, through the Middle East, touching on Africa, even up into parts of Eastern Europe as well. But does that trade route, does this involve any kind of a free trade, like a no tariffs type of arrangement among these nations, or is that not?
Sure, it does. They're all part of the same group. I can't say that for certainty, but I would find it to be incredibly counterproductive to not. And so all the groups that sign on to the initiative, I'm sure, are all going through, it's going to be incentivized. It's all about commerce.
Right.
The whole root structure is about commerce and being patrolled by military to make sure it goes smoothly. So yeah, and it gets deeper than that. Wait till you hear what's going on right now. But so anyways, 2021 rolls around, and you see massive acquisition of gold. Russia, Turkey, India, Poland, China, Kazakhstan, Hungary, Thailand, Japan, Brazil. They're all buying gold, and they're using the COMEX price, the suppressed price, to run cover for de-dollarization. September 2021 comes around. Here's maybe the biggest event of all of our lives, in my opinion, and I hope I'm wrong, but probably not. Before I get to that, let me ask you a question, Mike. What do you believe makes the dollar the world reserve currency?
Well, yeah, we've already been over this, but it's the Bretton Woods agreement that the dollar must be used by all countries to purchase petroleum products.
Well, that wasn't Bretton Woods. That you're close, but you are right. So the Bretton Woods agreement was that the dollar would be backed by gold, and so what countries would do is they would give us their gold back then. They would give us their gold, and we would hold it for them and pay them dollars.
Right. Good deal for us.
Well, because those dollars were always as good as gold, right? And with those dollars, they would buy U.S. treasuries, earning a return, which helped our indebtedness, right? Helped us build our infrastructure. So that now they're getting a return on a stagnant asset. They're not paying storage expenses. They're not worrying about it, and they have a more predictable rate of return, and they would just keep rolling over the treasuries. And if they ever wanted their gold back, they could exchange their dollars for gold. And it was that way until 1971. But
Exactly.
And the reason that changed was that President de Gaulle from France realized that we were printing more dollars to fund the Vietnam War and issuing more treasuries than we had supposedly at Fort Knox backing it. So he sent naval ships filled with dollars to New York Harbor demanding gold, and got probably half of the gold held at the U.S. Treasury. So Nixon closed the gold window in August of 1971. It was supposed to only be temporary, but he closed the gold window, going back on our promise since 1944 that we would redeem dollars for gold. At that point, the dollar was completely fiat. It was the arrangement that was struck in 1974 with Henry Kissinger and the Saudi kingdom that anointed the dollar the petrodollar. And that arrangement was, we will protect you. We will sell you ammunition and armaments, and we'll teach you how to use them, and we've got your back. No one will ever mess with you, ever. But for that, you will denominate oil globally in U.S. dollars, period.
And don't forget, the United States promised to look the other way on Saudi Arabia's human rights abuses.
Oh, of course, and
As
had
well,
all
right?
along. But for that privilege, OPEC would denominate oil globally in dollars. And so since 1974, every country on the planet has had to own dollars in order to buy oil.
So from 1971, then, wasn't then America's fate sealed eventually?
Absolutely. The dollar, if you look at the purchasing power since 1971, yeah, you can see exactly what happens when you render the currency completely fiat, with the ability to print at will with nothing standing behind it, no governor, if you will. And so it was the protection of the Saudi kingdom that has enabled the dollar to be world reserve. It's created this synthetic demand for dollars where every country on the planet has to buy it in order to buy oil. Well, the day we left Afghanistan, and I think there's no coincidence to this timing. We left Afghanistan in a terrible way. We left our own people behind enemy lines, and the people who trusted us behind enemy lines with their biometrics handed to the Taliban. We left in a very un-American way. The day after that, Russia announced a joint military cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia. Let me say that one more time. Russia announced a joint military cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia. The day after that, Russia announced the exact same thing with Nigeria. Now, Nigeria is part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So now you have China and Russia protecting Nigeria and Russia protecting Saudi Arabia. The day after that, Russia announced that they had hypersonic ICBM missiles, a technology the State Department later said they're very concerned about because we don't have it on all of their nuclear-powered submarines. This is their way of saying, don't mess with us the way you did Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi.
Right, and let me add a couple of context points. Correct me if I'm wrong, but number one, Nigeria is a major exporter of oil, or a major
Number two in OPEC.
producer. There we go. And then secondly, not only does America not have hypersonic missiles, but America has no air defenses against hypersonic missiles.
Right. They travel they travel up in the atmosphere at the speed well past the speed of sound and hit the ground at the speed of an asteroid. They can't.
Mach 20 is what I read recently from the Russian. I think the NATO designates it the SS-29, but I think Russia calls it the YARS, Y-A-R-S. Mach 20. So you're not going to intercept Mach 20.
No, and this is their way of saying don't even think about it. This is a whole different game. So look, our protection of the Saudi kingdom has given the dollar the world reserve status. Ain't happening anymore.
Right.
We're not the only big guy on the block. And so if you look at what has happened subsequently, Russia is now, Nigeria is now selling its oil to China for yuan. They've agreed to do it. Saudi Arabia has all but done the same thing. It gets even deeper. And the bond that China pays these countries in is a yuan-denominated petro-yuan bond, it's called. That bond is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange.
Whoa.
So these take their oil, like Iran, sell it to China for yuan in a bond form that they can then immediately convert into gold and take possession of. It's a cash and carry market. It's really not a futures market. So people buy it and take it. That's why it's delivered over 90 times more gold, almost 100 times more gold than the COMEX has in the last few years. So we see the dollar hegemony really being called into question when, for the first time since 1974, OPEC nations are selling their oil to other countries in settlement for something other than US dollars. And so we can take it a step further, and we'll get to how this all blows up in a minute.
Okay, all right. Hold on just a second, Andy. First of all, time-wise, we only have about 5 minutes left because we're coming up on that. But I also want to mention to the audience that people need to think about the ramifications of what you've just said, in that if the world abandons the petrodollar status, which is happening, you're just describing it, and especially given the fact that domestically the U.S. is printing trillions of dollars, which is devaluing the debt that's held by the countries that purchase the treasuries, then we might be just right on the verge of a global denouncing of the petro.
Let me tell you, give me 5 more minutes and I'll put a bow on it.
Okay, all right. Well, but we're thinking along the same lines. Go ahead.
So here we are in 2022. You have the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum that's been going on right now. And it is dealing with the coming of the new G8 BRICS, 4 BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, plus Iran, Indonesia, Turkey, and Mexico. Their GDP and purchasing power is already dwarfs the old Western dominated G8. You have the Chinese 3-ring strategy, which they're talking about, which is the geoeconomic relations with its neighbors and partners, think the Belt Road Initiative, and the new BRICS Plus or extended BRICS, including some members of the new G8, to be discussed in the new upcoming summit. You also have what just came out last week, the Russian-Iran-India corridor. This is a new north-south transportation corridor that's now in play. Think the Belt Road Initiative. This is another part of it. It's linking northwest Russia to the Persian Gulf via the Caspian Sea and Iran. Everyone else has to go around the Suez Canal. This is a really, really, really big deal. Here again, you have all of these countries, these BRICS nations, moving away from doing commerce with the dollar and trade routes, unilateral trade agreements, settling in other currencies, and all of it usurping the dollar. So what does all of this mean? Put it all together. You got gold being reclassified tier 1. You have 190 countries from around the world saying we want a new system. You have central banks gobbling up gold and repatriating it. You have the BRICS nations all coalescing. And you have a digital yuan that has already done 10 billion in transactions with success. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, they're the ones who own all the gold, produce all the gold. They don't sell any of the gold. They're the largest accumulators of it, and it's now tier 1. So how does this all bust apart? OPEC says on a Monday morning, on a Sunday night, you know what? We're being protected by our friends here in China and Russia. We've decided it's in the world's best interest that we no longer only sell oil in dollars. The minute that happens, think about it. 90% of the world has had to own dollars in order to buy oil, right? So now all those dollars get dumped because they don't need to hold them anymore. And it starts to really get dumped as the dollar becomes a hot potato. So you have all of the world dumping dollars. If you think inflation is bad now, wait till all those dollars come flooding home, creating massive hyperinflation. There's peg number 1, the dollar collapses. What moves inverse of hyperinflation? Interest rates. Interest rates go to the moon. Now pegs 2, 3, and 4 collapse like dominoes. Stocks, bonds, and real estate, all at the same time as the dollar collapses, all because OPEC says we're going to take oil and other currencies, and the world dumps dollars. Now the Fed does not have to be the one that ignites the fuse. The Fed will blame the BRICS nations, they'll blame Russia, they'll blame China, they'll blame OPEC, they'll blame Saudi Arabia, they'll blame them all, and the dollar evaporates like that. And everything collapses as interest rates spike, and you have a villain. And if you want to talk about a great reset and how it happens, well, that's exactly how it happens. And that's how close we are to it. And the fact that Saudi Arabia is negotiating with China to sell their oil in yuan, the fact that Nigeria is already doing it, the fact that the gold is now a tier one asset, all the central banks are buying it, all point to de-dollarization. And when de-dollarization happens on a massive scale, and it's going to happen on a Sunday night, you're going to wake up on Monday morning to holy crap, what just happened moment. And when that happens, it's like that, Mike. There's your great reset. There's your Klaus Schwab saying you'll own nothing and be happy, because everything that is of any value in this country, the four pillars of wealth, dollars, stocks, bonds, real estate, in one swift moment collapse. And how did it happen? The weaponizing of the dollar. Just like you said, you weaponize the dollar as the world reserve currency. You cannot tell the world who can and can't use it. By pushing Russia right into the open arms of China and their SIP system, the cross interbank payment system, which mimics the SWIFT, we have created a moment where all these other countries are saying, are we next?
Well, and
incentivize them to move away from the dollar. And it's happening right now in front of our eyes.
yeah,